Hello. 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 So here we are for another fun-filled episode of product management this time. We're going to talk about two primary topics in this particular discussion. We are going to look at new product development, and we're also going to look at the product lifecycle concept, or the PLC. The first thing we're going to talk about is new product development, and what we have to do is define what is meant by new product development. And you might think that that might be a relatively easy thing to do, but in reality, not so much, because it basically comes down to what an organization interprets a new product as meaning. Some people basically say unless it's like a transformational or revolutionary type product, then it's not a new product. Others will say, well, if I have a product already and I tweak it somehow, that's a new product. We're going to take a very broad perspective. We're not going to get way down in the weeds and try to figure out whether something is evolutionary, revolutionary, a real game changer, or whether it's just maybe a new and improved type product where we maybe take some laundry detergent and, as I said in the previous discussion, maybe we take Tide and put Downy in, and so now we have a different product, a new and improved product. So we're going to take a really broad perspective with respect to new products. There's a couple of reasons why new product development is important, and one is that regardless of how you define it, a lot of new products fail, and because a lot of new products fail or aren't successful, it means that existing products have to be profitable enough to make up for the slack of products that aren't so successful or absolute failures. Second reason for the importance of new product development is that an organization's survival depends on new product development. So you say, well, what do you mean by that, Murphy? Well, let's think about something, and many of you were probably born in the mid to late 1990s, and if you were to go back and look at kind of state of the art with respect to personal computers back in the mid to late 1990s, you would see the market dominated primarily by desktop computers. If we fast forward to 2017, it's not that desktops are obsolete, but they're not the predominant form of personal computing anymore. You've got laptops, you've got tablets, you've even got smartphones that can do a number of things that the desktop was relied on, let's say 20 to 25 years ago. So, if you were an organization and you were still focusing on selling nothing but desktop computers, your organization would either be in tremendous trouble or would likely be out of business now because the market has changed. All right, so we've established, at least we've discussed briefly, the importance of new product development, and what we'll spend the rest of the new product development discussion on is a new product development process. And like a couple other processes that we've talked about so far this summer, following the new product development process doesn't guarantee success, but it improves the opportunity for success. Right? There's always going to be vagaries in the marketplace. And even if you follow a process, it doesn't mean that that you're going to get things right. Sometimes if you follow directions, if you got cake in a box kind of stuff, and you're making the cake from the box, sometimes you can follow directions exactly, and the cake at the end doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to. It's the same thing with the new product development process. You can follow the steps, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And one of the arguments for following the new product development process is that even though it is costly and time consuming, the end result could be much improved simply by following the process, even if at the end you decide not to go forward with the particular product. Okay, so as I said, there is a process, and the process starts with the first step in the process is what is known as idea generation. Organizations have to come up with ideas for new products. And these ideas can come from several sources. One source is internal. Right? A number of organizations have research and development firms. Not research and development firms, research and development departments. Right? Another source of internal information is a company's employees. Right? So you've got the sources can be internal. The sources can be external as well. And external meaning parties that are outside of an organization. And so sometimes where organizations can get ideas from are customers. And, if you remember back when we were talking about the different kinds of segmentation, we talked about benefit segmentation. And where some organizations have come up with ideas for new products is in talking to customers. They've learned from customers, kind of what a customer would like in a product, and it doesn't correspond to anything that an organization currently offers. So as an example of that, if you've ever seen TV shows or movies from like the 1970s and early 1980s, and a guy, it's primarily guys, they might raise their arm up like that, and you look like here in their shirt, you might see huge stains. And what you had back in those days is you had two separate products. You had deodorant, which kept you from smelling, and then you had antiperspirants, which kept you from sweating. So if you only used the deodorant for your underarms, you would still sweat, and the sweat would end up, you'd see this moisture at kind of the crook between, your arm and your torso. And so what ended up evolving or coming out of that was a product that was both an antiperspirant and a deodorant. So again, that the ideas can come from external, and in that case, it came from a customer. Second phase of the product life cycle the new product development process is idea screening. And so this is where there's some culling of the ideas that you've come up with. And what you're looking for is basically, again, these are employees, right? This, either your new product development team or whatever. You've got a series of ideas, and you're figuring out, okay, which one of these ideas should we look at, and which one of these ideas should we put on hold or maybe discard? And what a savvy organization does is it periodically revisits some of the ideas that it has previously put aside. In part because sometimes an idea might not be the right idea now, but if we go 4, 5, or 10 years, that idea might have a lot more staying power. All right, so we've come up with ideas, we've screened ideas, and we've all been within the firm. Right, this has all basically been internal, coming up with the ideas, even though the ideas can come from an external perspective. The third phase, or the third stage of the new product development process is what is known as concept testing. And this is the first instance of external validation. And this is where the company takes its ideas to potential customers for their feedback. So if a company has come up with an idea, right, and it's vetted the idea and it says, okay, well, let's see how far this goes. What happens in the concept development or concept testing stage is that the idea is taken to a group of customers, might be a focus group, and all they're presented with is an idea for a product, just to get a sense for whether the customers like it or whether the customers don't like it. If there's a favorable outcome from that, an organization might proceed to the fourth step, which is business analysis, and this is where the organization looks at projections for revenues, cost, and profitability. And this stage can be problematic because what somebody, think about it from this perspective. If you come up with an idea that you think is a really, really good idea, and you get to the business analysis phase, you may do everything in your power to make sure that idea goes forward. And so what often happens in organizations at this stage is that the revenues are overestimated and the costs are underestimated. So what it looks like is this thing is going to be really, really profitable, when in fact it could just be a real dog. So it becomes very important in the business analysis phase for an organization to put together realistic revenue projections and realistic cost projections as well. So assuming that an organization has done this, right, and said, okay, we got a green light, and here again is the value of going through the process, right? You start out with an idea, you look at the idea, and then, keep ones that are good and kind of set aside the ones that aren't so good. You then take the idea and you get it vetted by prospective customers. If the prospective customers have given you a green light, you go and you do some revenue and cost projections. If basically it comes back that, yeah, it seems like a good idea, but there's really no way that we're going to be able to make this idea profitably, you stop before you go any further. If you've gotten a green light, then the next phase is what's known as product development. And this is where a prototype or a model of a product is shown to prospective customers for their feedback. So now what we have is we actually have the product. In the concept testing phase, we had an idea. In the product development phase, we actually have the product. And to give you an example, I did some work for Little Tikes, a toy company down in Hudson, Ohio. And what they have is, as part of their daycare center, they have a playroom where younger kids go. And when Little Tikes is bringing new products, or is thinking about bringing new products to the market, and this was true at least for the time that I worked for them, they would put these products in this playroom, and they would watch how the younger kids were playing with the product. And this was real helpful because if you think about toys for kids, toys are generally designed by adults, and adults think like adults, and adults don't think or act like kids. And so by putting these products in this daycare room or this child care room, Little Tikes was able to get a sense for how the product might be used or misused before it's brought to the market. So, assuming that we've gotten a green light with product development, the next stage is what's known as test marketing. And this is a stage that sometimes is skipped, and quite honestly, sometimes what companies do is once they get an idea, they just skip all the way from the idea to the commercialization, which is the final phase. And so you just skip all those other things because, as we said earlier, this is a time-consuming and costly process. So the test marketing is basically where an organization looks at the product that it's thinking about introducing to the market in realistic market situation. And there's a number of different ways that this can be done. I mean, there can be a physical test market where you take the product and its associated marketing mix and you put it into a particular market. So, sometimes you will see products that are tested in like Syracuse or Buffalo or Des Moines or Peoria, Illinois, because these are considered to be kind of cities that mirror the demographics of the United States. And so so an organization will get a sense for, how the product works, maybe how competitors position against it, whether or not the product's demanded, whatever. So assuming that the test market goes okay, the next phase is the commercialization or the product launch. And so again, what we have with the new product development process is we have a very sequential process, and again, it can be time consuming and it can be costly, but the potential value to it is that while it doesn't guarantee successes, it improves the opportunity for success. And why I like to talk about new product development before the product life cycle is the product life cycle, which refers to the phases that a product goes through from its beginning to its end. Right? The product life cycle begins with the product development phase. So the first phase in the product life cycle is product development. And one of the key things to keep in mind with the product life cycle or the PLC is that whether it's 5 stages or 4 stages or 6 stages, because different textbooks teach different PLC models. The key thing to keep in mind is that what the product life cycle says is that depending on where your product is in its life cycle, the way that it's managed, the way that it's marketed, should correspond to the phase of the product life cycle that the product is in. I know that sounds really basic, but to give you an example, right? Again, the first stage is the product development stage. The second stage of the product life cycle is the introduction or the launch, right? The commercialization that we talked about with the new product development. And what is really important in the introductory phase is it's really important for the product not to be out of stock, right? So this is where maybe the company's logisticians come into play. So maybe what you would do in the introductory phase of the product life cycle is you might end up expediting or speeding up shipments that are going to a particular location or locations because you don't want to be out of stock of the product, because in the introductory phase it's really important that people have the opportunity to purchase the product that is new to the marketplace. All right. So we've talked about introduction, we've talked about growth. The next stage is we've talked about product development and we've talked about introduction. The step that follows introduction is growth, and this phase is characterized by a rapid increase in sales volume. And so what you have a lot of is you have companies in many cases trying to maximize their market shares, and so you'll see a lot of product out on the market. You might see a lot of promotion out on the market, and again, that might be very different than in the introductory phase where you may not be. You want to have the product available, but you might not have an overabundance of the product available. So the first phase again is product development. The second phase is introduction. The third phase is growth. The fourth phase is what's known as maturity, and this is where sales begin to slow. And in part because what oftentimes happens is that other companies, once they see a product being successful, they jump into the market. So there tends to be much more competition, and from a business or marketing perspective, additional competition generally means that prices will decrease, or that there are much greater pressures on price. And so you might see multiple strategies being implemented by organizations in the maturity phase of the product life cycle. One would be product modification and kind of the new and improved stuff that we've talked about before, right? So one of the things that you might find is that again with laundry detergents, they're adding maybe they're combining two brands like the Tide and the Febreze that haven't been combined before. Maybe they've come up with maybe they've come up with a way to get like the same amount of washing out of a lower concentration of detergent, right? So you've got like new and improved product. So product modification is one strategy can be used. A second is market modification, and market modification refers to either finding new markets for the product, and so in some cases what organizations will do is maybe this is where an organization starts to look to non-domestic markets for its products. Alternatively, what an organization could do is it could attempt to get existing users to use the product more. So, back when I was in graduate school in the late 70s and early 1980s, the orange juice producers in this country, in the United States, came up with this slogan that orange juice just isn't for breakfast anymore. So what the orange juice producers were trying to do was they were trying to convince people that, hey, you don't have to drink orange juice just at breakfast. You can drink it, during the day, in the evening, before you go to bed, etc. So that would be an example of market modification. And the final phase of the product life cycle is the decline phase, and this is where there's an absolute decline in sales. And this phase is often characterized by organizations using either what is known as a milking or a harvesting strategy, which refers to where the organization reduces pretty much all the marketing expenditures, right, or cost, and keeps the price the same. So what it's attempting to do is it's attempting to milk or harvest by having revenues at one level and cost at a different level. It's trying to maximize kind of the contribution margin that it can get from a particular product. And I think a good example of decline is something that I alluded to earlier in the discussion, and that is the desktop computers. I mean, they're still for sale. Right? You can still buy desktop computers, but the retailers, the producers of those products, they're not really emphasizing desktops. They're pushing much more for laptops, tablets, and so on. And so you can still buy the desktops. There's not a lot of money, not a lot of resources being put into promoting those products. So I hit almost the 22-minute mark, but I'm getting good at this. See ya, bye.